Welcome to Dr. Void. We just hit 10,000 subscribers. Thanks a lot to each and every one of you for your constant support and love. This is unreal. In the year 2145, humanity's presence stretched into the depths of Saturn's icy rings. The once distant realm had become an industrious frontier, its moons transformed into outposts, its rings mined for resources. Amid the vastness of space, a research drone glided silently through the frozen debris. The drone, controlled by Aegis Station, beamed back distorted signals before falling silent, its last transmission filled with cryptic images of an enormous metallic structure veiled within the rings. Along with Lieutenant Marco Vance, a sharp but dependable pilot, and R8, a sarcastic AI aide, seasoned engineer with a dark history, Dr. Evelyn Kai boarded the Astraeus. Tasked with looking into the oddity was the three. Evelyn considered this more than simply a task. It was an opportunity to establish herself and quiet the ghosts of failure that had dogged her career. Gravitational disturbances in the rings caused bits of ice and rock to be dislodged when the Astraeus neared the construction. The team got ready. Their breaths were short as the mysterious construct emerged. Its surface alive with shifting patterns, it shimmered, an impossibility of union of alien geometry and old intent. Evelyn's cool head covered a great discomfort. This was this location? Whose or what had created it? As the Astraeus closed in, questions remained unmet. Unknown to them, the anomaly had already started to stir. Its presence permeated the ship's systems, the crew's mental state, and the frigid space beyond. With its hull trembling against the gravitational distortions radiating outward from the metallic construction, the Astraeus sliced through Saturn's rings. Evelyn seized the console and peered at the readings. The surface of the construct sent weak, too repetitive pulses of energy, not random. It was living in her own sense, not just a thing. With strained voice, Lieutenant Marco Vance said, "We're within 2 clicks." Hands solid on the controls, he leaned forward in his seat. Eerie reflections throughout the cabin come from the shimmer of the rings outside. R8, assign me something. Our focus is what? With its usual dry humor, the AI's voice buzzed through the airwaves. Preliminary research indicates the structure defies all known materials science. Not one point of entrance or seam. It seems as though it grew here, or maybe it always was. Evelyn disregarded the tone of R8. Her fingertips ran ghostly searches across the console. The facts didn't make sense. The framework was collecting energy, not only reflecting it, sifting traces from the ship itself. "Marco, stand here. I am observing variations in the electricity grid. Whatever that thing is, it is exhausting for us," Marco said, preparing the Astraeus's defense systems. "Drain this." The ship lurched before he could act. Red warning lights covered the cabin. Evelyn's gut turned as she watched the pulse of the anomaly becoming more robust, its rhythm accelerating like a heartbeat. The broadcast screen wavered. One vision emerged. A humanoid figure shimmering like light on water, transparent. It only had the hazy silhouette of something observing. It lacked eyes or characteristics. "Is it transmitting that, or are we getting that?" Marco inquired, his voice now softer. "It's not a transmission," Evelyn said, her voice strained. "It's," says a conjecture, "it recognizes that we are here." The anomaly pulsed once more, and this time the systems of the spacecraft flicked dangerously. Evelyn battled herself to keep her cool. "Reroute R8's power to cover shields. Marco, tug us back." "No time," Marco yelled as the spacecraft jounced with a shock. The pulse of the anomaly sharpened and the person on the screen started to move with withering outline. Evelyn looked and something primitive bit her thoughts. Humanity was not designed to live here. Still, it was too late to be leaving. The anomaly had entered the spacecraft, its unseen tentacles trapping them into its orbit. Evelyn said, "We've been caught," and her hands shook. The Astraeus hung immobile as though caught in the grasp of the oddity. Saturn's rings whirled abnormally outside, shards of ice smashing in terrible, silent anarchy. Evelyn pushed herself to concentrate. Her fingers feverishly at the console steadied the ship. She had sweat beads on her forehead, even in the cabin's chilly. Marco yelled, grabbing the armrest of his chair. "Status report." His typical arrogance was replaced with a biting edge of anxiety. "Shields are holding at 20%, Evelyn said, her voice strained. "Whatever this creature is, it is consuming our power systems. We will be dead in less than an hour if it maintains current." Cheerful as always, R8 remarked. The holographic interface of the AI flickering on the console. Its mocking voice suddenly seemed like a fake effort at normalcy. "I have gone through every scan conceivable. It is a node more than just a structure, a center for something far bigger." Evelyn swung aggressively toward the interface. "Lighter? Share." The cabin lights turned out before R8 could reply, sending them into semi-darkness. The air hummed low, resonant tones that vibrated through the hull. Evelyn stopped. It came not from the ship, it derived from the oddity itself. Under his breath, Marco swore. "That's it. We are dragging out. Should this creature desire us, it can wait." The ship jerked severely. Evelyn's heart dropped. Panels fired and the cabin echoed with an unbearable metallic scream. The abnormality was not allowing their departure. The hum became louder, more intrusive, ringing its way into their consciousness. Evelyn murmured, her voice shaking. "Marco, don't fight it. It's communicating, not only holding us. We have to find its preferences." Marco gave her an incredulous look. "Chatting? You are reporting this to me? Object is alive?" "Indeed," Evelyn said softly, staring at the screens. Across the surface of the anomaly, patterns started to develop, a hypnotic dance of light and shadow. "And I think it's trying to bring us inside." The hum got stronger and nearly intolerable. Evelyn clenched her teeth, her vision blurred as the screen's patterns seemed to extend to her. She could sense it now, a presence, enormous and unfathomable, pressing on her brain. Images flew through her mind. Strange settings, tall towers and never-ending emptiness dotted with flickering light. The fuzz lifted Marco's voice. "Evelyn, snap from it." Blinking, she gasped for oxygen as the pictures disappeared. She said, "I'm fine." Yet her hands shook. "R8, could we stabilize long enough to look at more?" The artificial intelligence hesitated. "Yes, if by stabilize, you mean delay the inevitable destruction of the ship. 30 minutes is something I can offer you." "Then we come in," Evelyn insisted. Marco looked at her in disbelief. "You can't be serious." "We have no choice," she said, her voice firm despite the terror biting at her gut. "This thing is not allowing us to travel. We are as good as dead regardless if we cannot determine what it wants." Marco stopped and then nodded grudgingly. "All right, but the second things go south, we are out." Evelyn never answered. She could not get rid of the belief that there was no going back. The markings on the Astreus changed to unfold like a flower as it floated nearer the anomaly. Before them yawned a corridor, black and calling. Evelyn briefly experienced a great degree of anxiety. Whatever lay inside, it was ancient, strong, and absolutely foreign. And it had been calling for them. Driven into the widening path of the anomaly, the Astreus floated ahead. Like liquid metal, its surface shimmered as the ship went by, rippling. Evelyn stopped her breath in her throat. Beyond the door was a nothingness, an endless black expanse broken with weak pulsing lights that appeared to create a labyrinthine network. "Where the heck are we?" Marco's voice broke across the intercom. Though the spacecraft now moved of its own will, his hands hung over the controls. Evelyn gazed into the viewport, her brain trying to understand what she was seeing. This isn't space. They are something else. The hologram of R8 flicked to life. Preliminary study indicates we operate in a non-physical dimensions construct. Translation: inside its head or gut we are. Marco said, "That's comforting," tightly clutching his chair. "Reminds me to thank Command for this assignment." The spacecraft jerked as light tendrils from the walls snipped toward the Astreus. Evelyn's heart accelerated. Shields account for 15%. R8, what is occurring? It seems the framework is scanning us, R8 said. Or maybe it's deconstructing our molecule by molecule. Difficult to say. Evelyn's hands raced over the panel, guiding power to steady the ship. Marco, be ready for a hand-operated override. Should this attempt to separate us, we must be ready to rebel. The tendrils of light latching on the spacecraft grew more radiant as she spoke. Evelyn had an unusual pressure in her mind, as though her ideas were being disjointed and reorganized. The hum came again, deeper now, vibrating in her chest. With a tense voice, Marco remarked, "I don't like this." "Evelyn, what is our next step?" The lights outdoors changed before she could respond. Patterns emerged, creating exotic symbols that changed and flicked like live language. Evelyn's vision darkened and the symbols started to make sense, impossible logic. She said, "It's speaking to us," barely audible. She stretched out automatically, her fingertips caressing the console. The symbols surged, and for a minute she connected, a burst of knowledge not of her own. Her mind burnt the symbols, flashing images of a planet engulfed in light, tall towers falling into ash, and a great presence emerging from the ruins. It neither was good or evil. It was just what it was. "Evelyn!" Marco yelled, jerking her back into reality. Under the weight of the tendrils, the spacecraft moaned. The lights within fluttered dangerously. "It's showing me something," she murmured, her voice quivering. "A warning. Alternatively, maybe an invitation." "Well, it's a terrible host," Marco said. "Back off. We're not waiting to find out what dessert is on offer. R8, allow me to have hand control." "Manual override enabled," R8 said dryly. "But I have to tell you, trying to fight the abnormality will probably cause a reaction." Marco clenched his teeth, grabbed the controls, dragging the spacecraft away from the tentacles. The Astreus broke loose from their hold for a brief dash forward. The triumph was fleeting, though. The tentacles recoiled, then swung out with bone-rattling power at the spacecraft. Evelyn was flung against her seat and saw nothing but swimming. Alarms went off as the buzz of the abnormality became intolerable. The corridor started to fall apart, the web of lights tumbling into anarchy. "Brace yourselves," Marco cried, fighting the controls as the spacecraft spun. Evelyn grabbed hold of her console, her mind flying. They had come too far to go backwards now. The abnormality was a riddle simply waiting to be answered, not only a threat. Evelyn silently vowed as the Astreus sank more into the crumbling void. She would find the truth at all the expenses. The Astreus arrived into a huge void beyond reason. The ship floated in an area where the limits of reality appeared to vanish. Towering obsidian and light rose constructions sprung from a ground that neither solid nor liquid. The chamber's walls pulsed with vitality, their surfaces alive with foreign symbols that flickered dimly, like though living. Evelyn staggered to her feet, her body still shook from the rough ride on the ship. The alarms had turned off, leaving an uncomfortable quiet in their wake. She ran over the exhibits. Environmental readings reflect vary. It seems as though this area defies accepted physics. Marco inhaled hard, his fingers white on the armrests. "You're telling me we're imprisoned in an extraterrestrial funhouse where optional gravity exists? Superb." "It's more than that," Evelyn responded. She was unable to turn away from the vista. The outer structures seemed to be observing. They felt alive. This is more than simply a venue. It follows a mechanism, designed for a machine created to flow. "Process what?" Marco asked, his tone somewhat annoyed. "Us?" Evelyn ignored it. She paid too much attention to the symbols carved on the walls. Her eyes appeared to cause them to change and evolve, creating patterns that pulled at her awareness. She sensed a draw, a need for knowledge. "R8, she murmured, sounding strained. "Can you interpret any of this?" The artificial intelligence faltered. "The glyphs seem to be a kind of knowledge retention mechanism. They are layered data structures, not only emblems. They will take time to pass. We have no time, Marco said. Whatever this area is, the ship is already suffering here. See this. He pointed to the console, where energy levels swung rapidly. Ignoring him, Evelyn moved toward the porthole. Her thinking felt as though the symbols were attaching themselves into her consciousness. Images started to gather in her mind. A society far older than humans, its people eaten by their own creation. The anomaly had been created as a storehouse of their essence. But there had gone a mistake. They weren't ready, Evelyn said softly. This was supposed to protect them, but it swung on them. Marco crossed his eyebrows. What do you mean? Evelyn turned to face him, eyes wide with insight. This whole structure functions as a sentient archive. It is attempting to classify our ideas, our recollections. It is lacking, though, shattered. Pointing to the flickering lights, Marco added, broken or not, it's killing us. If we stay here instead of leaving... The ship jerked sharply, cutting him off. The lights turned down and the wall glyphs blazed brilliantly. Evelyn gasped with a great headache that seemed like a piercing pressure. She gripped the console for comfort while bits of foreign memories shot through her head. Her voice almost audible, she said, "It's inside me. It's attempting to... see." Marco took her arm. "We must go, today." Evelyn shook her head, even though the agony almost knocked her down. "We can't. Should we leave now, it will ruin us. We have to let it complete." "Let it wrap up what?" Marco insisted, his voice growing louder. "Tear us apart." "No," Evelyn said, her voice more steady now. "It's not meant to be killing us. It seeks to grow under our direction, but it is not sure how. They are... dropped." Marco fixed her, his face a mixture of incredulity and terror. "And on that assumption, you are ready to gamble our lives?" Evelyn did not reply. Her eyes went back to the glyphs, their light dancing with her own pulse in sync. For better or worse, they had grown to be a part of the tale of the anomaly, and it had grown part of theirs. The inside of the spacecraft darkened more, sending them into a twilight of changing shadows. The glyphs outside pulsed rapidly, their light flowing across the viewport in waves that appeared to sweep into the cabin. Marco froze, hands clutching the console as though it were the only solid object in the cosmos. Marco said, his voice taut with controlled dread, "I don't trust this. We are only data to it, whatever it is doing to us. Figures, equation." Evelyn hardly heard him. Her head was swimming with bits of ideas not her own. Alien ideas fluttered across her awareness like fireflies, memories of far-off worlds, of great complex buildings stretching into eternity. The oddity was reaching out, yearning to be understood, not only listing them. "It's fractured," she said, her hands shaking as they floated above the console. "It's imperfect. It's not meant to hurt us. A slice of something more substantial." Marco pointed her in a glare. "Whether incomplete or not, it is breaking the ship apart. Now is the time if you have a brilliant idea." Evelyn felt her ideas coalesce. "It lacks context, so it is not whole. Though it doesn't know how to digest what it is seeing, it is attempting to understand humans. We have to provide it a framework of reference. And how precisely should we accomplish that?" Marco questioned, his voice rising. "Write it as a user manual?" The hologram of R8 flared alive. Actually, that may not be too far off. If the anomaly is looking for data, giving organized input might help to stabilize its interactions with humans. Evelyn nodded while her head whirled. "We can direct its emphasis if we give it regulated knowledge. Show it what it needs to see. Or give it a map straight to our brains," Marco shot. "This is absurd." "We have no option," Evelyn remarked forcefully. "If we battle it, the ship will not survive. Should we work together, we may take power." Marco paused, then let out a sigh. "Fine. What are your needs?" Evelyn went to the center console and her fingers flew over the controls. She started sending organized material including human anatomy, star charts, simple arithmetic. The surface of the anomaly throbbed in response. the rhythm of the glyphs matching the data stream. The cabin's pressure relaxed a little. R8 said, "It's working. Energy readings are stabilizing." But Evelyn still had work to do. Closing her eyes, she inhaled deeply and started a closer relationship. The ship's systems connected straight to the anomaly, granting it access to shards of human memory and ideas. The ship shivered right away. Evelyn gasped as images flooded her senses. She saw her childhood house, the face of her late mother, the frigid, never-ending training nights for missions like this. The abnormality mirrored her ideas back to her, fractured and twisted. Marco eyed her with both wonder and dread. "Evelyn, are you good?" "It is studying," she murmured, her voice remote. "It's life." Once more, the glyphs outside moved to create complex designs with an odd beauty. Evelyn connected strongly as though the anomaly were talking to her personally. But the patterns started to shift then. The throbbing lights swung like a flame about to go out. Evelyn felt her heart sink as she understood the abnormality was dying rather than being unfinished. She continued, her voice tense. "It's collapsing. If it doesn't work, it will follow us." Marco cursed in underglow. "Then what the devil are we supposed to do?" Evelyn peered at the console, her head whirling. The abnormality had contacted them, yearning knowledge. These days, it required something more. Her voice firm, she added, "We finish it. We assist it in completing its archive." Marco's eyes got wider. "You are out of your mind." Evelyn conceded, "Maybe. But that's the only way." Sitting at the console, Evelyn started the last data link with shaky fingers. The ship's systems strung against the pull of the anomaly. The Astraeus vibrated softly. The cabin's air seemed thick and heavy, as though an invisible entity were pressing down on us. Tensed and silent, Marco stood behind her as his gaze jumped between the viewport and the flashing monitors. "Are you absolutely certain about this?" With scarcely audible voice, he asked. Evelyn did not reply. Not now, she couldn't afford uncertainty. Her head spun with ideas and strange bits. She had seen what the anomaly was seeking to preserve, a civilization lost to time, its essence dispersed throughout the earth. It had waited millennia for someone to complete what it cannot do. She said at last, "I'm not sure, but I know it's our only chance." The holography of R8 came alive. Connection kept steady. Energy values vary, but within reasonable bounds. You should understand this is very careless. "Noted," Evelyn whispered. She bent forward, staring at the outside glyphs. "Marco, I have you keep an eye on the energy levels. We will overload if they spike too high." "And then we die," Marco remarked bitterly. "Got it." Evelyn drew a long breath and closed her eyes. She let the link to deepen and for the abnormality to show itself. It was reaching into her head, gathering shards of her memories, her ideas, her soul, not only reading the data of the spacecraft. She felt her identity breaking beneath the weight of the trade. She felt herself falling. But there was understanding among the anarchy. The anomaly was a vessel, a container for something higher than a machine. Built to serve as a last haven for their brains as their planet collapsed. It had been designed to hold the awareness of an ancient race. But something had gone wrong. The oddity had been split and frantic because the transfer was inadequate. It was now contacting her in search of the last component to help her to recover herself. Evelyn said, her voice far away, "It's using me. It requires a host, a means of archiving stabilization." Marco's head swung to meet her. "Wait, you are implying it wants to upload itself into you? In like fashion? Always?" "Yes," Evelyn answered, her voice firm despite the terror biting at her. "This is the only path to complete the process." "That's unbelievable," Marco yelled. "You have no idea what it will do to you either." "I know," Evelyn remarked gently, "but it would fall apart if I neglect this. We shall thus also." Marco fixed her, his face caught between sadness and rage. "There must be still another approach." Evelyn answered with great conviction, "There isn't." She gestured to R8. Get the interface ready. Move everything required for the anomaly. With a typically gloomy tone, R8 added, Evelyn, this is an unprecedented decision with catastrophic potential consequences. Are you quite certain? I am, she said, her voice firm. R8 paused, then started the movement. The blazing glyphs outside flooded the cabin with light. Evelyn gasped as the weight of the archive washed into her head. It was like clutching a star, a burning, limitless presence that devoured anything she thought about. Her memories melting into the great expanse of the anomaly, she felt herself drifting away. Still, there was clarity within the anarchy. The oddity was maintaining life rather than only knowledge. Her own voice blended with the remnants of the old race that gathered within of her. Outside shimmers, their erratic flashing steadied into a steady, regular beat. The presence of the anomaly calmed down, nearly quiet. Evelyn experienced a strong feeling of togetherness, as though she had joined something far more than herself. Marco's voice pierced the stillness. Evelyn, are you? Still you? She opened her eyes, her gaze far yet concentrated. She said, her voice weighted with an unearthly resonance. I'm here, but I'm not alone myself. One last time the anomaly pulsed, its light bathing the Astreus. Evelyn knew they had done it. The archive comprised all that needed to know. The throbbing light of the anomaly lessened, then faded into a gentle, ethereal glow. The stifling buzz that had permeated the spacecraft disappeared, then nearly quiet silence took over. Evelyn closed her eyes, sat still at the console, her breathing steady, yet shallow. Marco loomed close, caught between anxiety and sympathy. Evelyn, he asked warily, tell me, please. Her eyes opened slowly, then for a time they did not seem like her own. They shined with an odd, inner glow, as though the oddity itself looked back through her. She blinked, and the brilliance dimmed, rendering her face incomprehensible. I'm here, she said, her voice gentle yet layered, as though several voices murmured under her own. Marco moved back, his hand hovering close to his sidearm. What does that indicate? Are still you? Evelyn stood, her motions slow and careful as if she were evaluating her own body. She added, I'm still me, but I also am them. The archives. It lives inside of me right now. That's not exactly reassuring, Marco said. He turned to face the window, where the surface glyphs of the anomaly had settled into complex designs. The construct appeared less dangerous now. Rather, it emanated a subdued old majesty. Evelyn said, her voice cool, the transfer is complete. We were never supposed to suffer from the archive. It was looking for a means of survival, therefore guaranteeing the preservation of the knowledge of its authors. And now it's inside you, Marco added, his voice tense. What transpires next? Evelyn glanced toward the porthole, her eyes far off. The archive aims to understand and preserve. It is a seed, not only a storehouse. Its writers meant for it to convey their legacy to other realms. So what? Marco queried. You're just going to tote it around? Be some sort of cosmic librarian? It's more than that, Evelyn responded, her voice strong. The archive has exposed worlds, civilizations, possibilities. It has knowledge that may transform what we know. Marco shot back. Or destroy it. Evelyn, you are playing with fire. Maybe, she said, but what was the need of being here if we fail to grow from this? Marco groaned and massaged the back of his neck. All right, assume for a moment that I agree. Right now, what are our responsibilities? Evelyn turned to face him, her posture firm. We go. The archive is stable and has everything it requires, but its authors left this place for a specific purpose. It is not supposed to remain inactive anymore. Marco's eyes closed. We activate it, you're saying? Yes, Evelyn said. Still not here, though. We must return, let mankind choose what to do with it." "That's a hell of a bet," Marco said. "What if they brand it as a weapon, or it turns on us?" Evelyn halted, the weight of the archive squeezing on her ideas. She said, "I'm not sure. Still, doing nothing is not an option. This information might either save or doom us. In any case, we have nothing to bury." Marco shook his head, his look a mixture of annoyance and hesitant acquiescence. "You always had a natural theatrical flair." Evelyn let forth a weak smile. "Someone needs to keep things intriguing." As the anomaly loosened its grasp, the ship shivered somewhat. The hallway ahead glowed dimly. Evelyn had both dread and a flood of relief. They were heading out, but the road ahead was full of unknown twists. Evelyn turned back toward the window as the Astraeus floated free of the construct. The light of the anomaly vanished, a faint echo of its creator's will. She understood their goal was far from done. She had been given the information of the archive, but its intended use and repercussions were yet unknown. Marco grimaced as he fixed the direction of the spacecraft. "Let's hope your assessment of this is accurate, Evelyn. Since you're not..." She nodded, staring heavenward at the stars. "I know." The ship sped forward, the anomaly behind it. But Evelyn could sense it, a subdued hum at the brink of her consciousness. Now the archive was waking, the legacy of its authors alive in her, and a fresh chapter was opening someplace deep within space. Months later, the Astraeus landed on Earth with its shattered hull showing traces of its voyage. Evelyn landed on the pad. The sunshine was severe after the icy alien brightness of the anomaly. Marco trailed, his hand never moving from his sidearm, his face set in a worried scowl. The debriefing continued non-stop. Demanding responses, officials from every area of the space program pointed and accusatory in their inquiries. Evelyn spoke gently, leaving out specifics on the actual character of the oddity. She said of it as an antique relic with no imminent threat, a broken fabrication. She sensed their discomfort though, the hunger in their gaze. Their desire was for what the oddity contained. Knowing was power, and they could feel the weight of what she held. That evening, Evelyn was by herself in her chambers, staring at the stars from the window. She was still learning to live with. The archive buzzed weakly in her head. It murmured to her in bits, showing her views of far-off galaxies, extinct civilizations, and the complex fabric of the cosmos. She understood the hazards associated with what she had returned. Humanity was irresponsible, aspirational, and frequently oblivious to the results of its activities. Depending on how the archive was used, its knowledge may be a blessing or a curse. But Evelyn also harbored optimism. The archive served as a reminder of what may be accomplished when a society aimed higher than itself, not only as a storehouse of knowledge. It was a legacy that may motivate others to see outside their own confines. Evelyn closed her eyes as the evening became darker, her ideas floating about. She sensed the archive settle, its calm yet wary presence. The echoes of its creators stayed somewhere in the universe, their tale now entwined with hers. Evelyn promised to protect the archive, to learn from it, and to make sure its legacy would lead mankind toward a better future in the quiet of her chamber under the unceasing expanse of stars. For either good or bad, the oddity had selected her. She also would not let it down.